Hi, babe. Welcome to the Horror Babe Show. I'm your host, Chelsea Beller. Today's guest is Sara Fletcher, who plays Kathy in the horror sci fi thriller feature, The Daemon. Sara and I don't hold anything back in this virtual hangout. We talk about the spooky things kids say, the horror community, existentialism, acting, loads more. So let's tune in to my conversation with Sara. Well, I'm now recording.
You could have recorded all of it. Let's talk about all the stuff. Let's talk about
Let's just
witchy
talk about
stuff.
everything. Let's get into
Let's
it.
talk about trauma. Let's talk
Yeah.
about let's
I
talk
think-
about perimenopause, which is its own horror show.
Yes. Oh, because life is horror, isn't it? Life is pain, but
We're just bags of meat that like die at the end, right?
sadly, yes.
I mean, I hate to say that because it sounds so like terrible, but I think in some ways it's also very freeing when you just sort of like realize like what life really is, which is just like, okay, we're just like these beings in these like bags of meat moving through this like tangible organism filled world, so how do we sort of navigate that and also find joy,
Yeah,
because eventually we'll leave the bag of meat behind
right. And
for
move on to
some.
another one.
Yeah,
Maybe.
exactly. My this is crazy. My 3-year-old in the car yesterday said to me, he goes, Mama, when I die, I become someone else. And then when that person dies, they become someone else. And I go, well, who were you before you were Rivers? And he goes, Ella, who's like a close family friend, who's still
Oh my
very
God.
alive. And I was like,
Oh.
okay.
I personally don't have children, and I choose not to. And part of that is because they say scary shit.
They do.
They do.
They do. He's talked about like before, like he has like a deep sense of certain things, and he's said things before where he's like, yeah, my other mom. And I'm like, your other mom? Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, I'm your mom.
Mm-hmm. And you want to talk about some really crazy stuff? My oldest, who's 8, I was told when I was pregnant. This is totally digressing from like us talking about horror stuff, but it's kind of horrifying because it's ghost.
I don't care.
It's ghost stuff. Do you love ghost stuff?
Yeah, I love ghost stuff.
This is a ghost story. I was pregnant with my first kid, and a friend of mine was going through a breakup, and she goes, let's just go see tarot reader. And I had never been to a tarot reader. And I was like, yeah, cool, let's go do this. This is going to be super fun. And the woman who I saw said to me that my son would see dead people until he was probably about 4. And then she told me a bunch of crazy stuff about family members of mine that like no one would know, like really, really specific things.
Oh my gosh.
Fast forward, would be sleeping, and my biggest fear was that like if he had he always wanted to bird himself, he would like pull a blanket over his face while he was sleeping, which is really terrifying and like totally a horror movie. And I would always go in his room late at night, and I would be like, oh my God, he's gonna die, like he's gonna suffocate to death. And so I pulled this whole blanket off his face. So I started seeing these things on his monitor. There would be these orbs of light. I'm not kidding. I'll send you the video. It's crazy, and it would travel back
I'm gonna
and forth.
get chills.
The psychic had also told me that my husband's grandmother was going to be there and protect him. And I, at the time, I was like, oh, okay, cool. I mean, I hope she is. Great.
Yeah.
So there would be these orbs of light, and I would go in his room, and we eventually had Duvetine that we like blacked out all his windows, so there was no light. And I finally one day recorded this orb, and it would trace around his whole neck and body, and it happened until he was about a year old. And so I have this video footage of this orb, and it's like very specific, and it's very crazy, and it's very weird. I think about that, and I'm like, well, how is that explainable by science? Like I get that like there's no scientific measurement that's gonna like validate it, but I can tell you that I would stand in his room holding his monitor, watching this orb trace his body, and look in his crib, and there would be nothing there, and I'd be staying there with goosebumps. And there was like a light in his room that would flash off and on, and it was like really wild. Yeah, it was really crazy. I've had too many weird experiences like that where I'm like, there's other stuff out there. We just don't, we're just like too small to understand.
Absolutely. Like, maybe because I think that we continuously evolve. I don't think we've reached like our final form as humans, Homo sapiens. Like, I think there will be a time many, 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 many moons from now where like maybe we will be able to contact them in a way that isn't just, through tarot cards or through a medium or something. Like, we'll be able to just, pick up the phone. Hey, grandma, like,
But like,
who knows? Wow.
fun cup. It's a very fun cup.
Oh my God, thank you. I got
Mm.
it from the Mystic Museum in Burbank, if you're familiar.
Oh yes, I need to go back to a Mystic shop. I haven't been to a Mystic shop in a minute, and I'm like,
Where are you based again?
So I'm based out of Grand Rapids now, but I was in Los Angeles for 20 years. So
Right.
we
Yeah.
just moved here, which is pretty wild. So there's definitely like a really interesting sense of seasons now that I didn't have
Yeah.
before. Um, that I'm experiencing like fully where I like look out the window and I'm like, oh, there's just snow out there.
What made you move out there?
I'm from Ohio originally. My husband is he's from Grand Rapids. We just needed to be closer to family. And like, you don't have to be in Los Angeles anymore to be a filmmaker. You don't have to be in LA anymore to be an actor. And so we just wanted to be somewhere where we could have a lot more nature around us and we could have
Yeah.
family help with our kids. And the really
Yeah.
cool thing is that there's like a really awesome film community here. I was like, oh, I had no idea, you know? I mean, I
Yeah.
think those people exist everywhere. You just have to find them.
Of course. Yeah. It's not as common as walking into a Starbucks in Los Angeles and your barista, is an
Right.
actor or whatever.
Right, right. Yeah, most of the time when you
Yeah.
walk into a place out here, they're like, people be like, "You're an actor." Oh, okay. Like, there's no,
Yeah.
everybody's like, they don't, it doesn't process for them, which is great.
Nope.
I'm like, I don't need to talk about it. It's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, right. I'm sick of talking about it.
No, it's good because
Yeah.
there is like a really cool group of people out here that we are like working on stuff together, and everybody's like super gung ho and excited, and there's this like deep sense of community and art that happens, which is really cool because I think sometimes because it's
Mm,
like there's so many people in Los Angeles that I think sometimes it's hard to find your tight community. Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
Who you really
Oh, yeah.
vibe with, who you're like, these are the people I'm going to make stuff with, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So are you from Los Angeles?
I'm not. I'm from the Bay Area, so still a
Okay.
California girl, but I moved here 11 years ago?
Oh, so you're like LA native now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like I've been finding more and more and more of a community in horror, which is really, really nice because like anybody, I had a weird journey full of detours, and then finally I was like, horror. What about here? What
Right,
about
right,
this? You
right.
know? And then, like, slowly but surely, I've been finding, like, Chelsea Stardust and Fina Sanchez and Allison Starlock and you and, like, all these different people who are like, "Hey, I'm a part of this community. I'm a filmmaker. I'm a female filmmaker. I've done this. I've done that. I'm working on 1,000,000 projects right now," And it's, like, just so nice to be able to meet these people and, call myself a part of their circle.
I think you're really right. I think one of the things that's like really cool about the horror community, which I didn't realize for a long time, is that there is this deep acceptance for female filmmakers. And
Yeah,
also, I feel like the horror community where everybody's just like weird enough. And when I say horror, I mean that very generally. I mean, like, it could be
right.
aliens, it could be
Mhm.
because like really horror is more like to me like the genre community. Like, it could be aliens, it could
Yes,
be fantasy, it could be witches, it could be ghosts, it could be murder, it could be,
exactly.
blood and guts. Like it's like that whole community. I feel like I'm like, oh, you're all my kind of weirdos.
Yeah.
Like you're the kind of people that I want to be a weirdo with. Like I like
Yeah.
making commercial content is awesome and super fun, but like I want to be around weirdos who make weird jokes,
Yeah.
who are like also awkward at times, and there's like an
Yeah.
absolute acceptance, and there's also I think a real support that happens too. I think
Mhm.
sometimes in like mainstream media there's a little bit more of like a competitive thing that goes on, and I feel like at
Mhm.
least in the like horror genre community there's less of that, and there's more of like a building up and like, how can I help you? And like, how can we create
Yeah.
together? Because we're all just bags of meat. You know what I mean? Like, we're all just,
Yeah.
like there's a sense of like the sense, sort of like maybe like the overarching sense of death that comes with making horror genre content.
Yeah.
Allows people to be like, oh, okay, yeah, I get it. We're all just here for like a hot second. So like, let's
Yep.
tap into like the trauma that exists with that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I literally couldn't agree more. What actually like started your horror journey? What is your like origin story when it comes to getting into horror?
It's really funny. I like as a kid, like I'll say this about horror. Horror when I watch it affects me so much, my like physical body, that I have to be really careful. And growing up as a kid, like we just didn't watch a lot of movies. That makes me sound like really silly, but we lived in the woods. We had like 4 channels, right? I'm dating
Yeah,
myself. And we didn't like the
that's
closest
fine.
movie theater was like a distance away, and we just didn't see movies. So
Sure.
like all of my
Yeah.
friends who are filmmakers are like, "You haven't seen this movie?" And it's in all genres. Being in Los Angeles for 20 years working as an actor, I
Mhm.
was like I wanted to do the weird stuff. Like I was like I want to get weird. And part of getting weird was saying yes to anything and everything. And so
Yeah.
the more that I did, the more I was like, "Oh, this horror community, the genre community, they're like my weirdos. Like they're the people who want to explore sort of the parts of life that we don't necessarily
Mhm.
always talk about, and we like and really put
Yeah.
a magnifying glass to them." And so for me, that's kind of where I think it really came from, was just like feeling like there was a really cool sense of community that wanted to make art specifically as opposed to
Right.
sellable material. Not that we all don't want to sell our material and make shitloads of money
Right.
and continue, but like I think it was that sort of sense that brought me in. And then because I was a young actress in the industry, it was like, well, what's available to me, what am I able to do? And
Right.
horror was always there. And also,
Mhm.
like, who doesn't want to get covered in guts and blood? And like I was the person who was like, I don't care if I'm messy or if I look terrible, like let's do the weird stuff. I think for me that's like really where it came from. And then as getting to do those projects, you get to really know that the indie horror world, which is very different than the commercial
Mhm.
horror world. And
Definitely.
I started meeting more and more filmmakers who I just found like they were just like the scrappiest of scrappy people, and also like the most positive, which I found
Yeah.
really interesting because they're writing about really deep, dark stuff, yet they're so scrappy and so positive. And you're like, well, that's a
Yeah.
really interesting dichotomy. Like, what's going on there?
Right. I know. What is up with that? It is so weird. Like what you were saying, like we watch horror all the time, and so we're very familiar with death, and we all just know it's gonna end one day, and like just make shit while you can.
Make shit what you can. I think that's part of it. Like
Yeah.
I keep saying to my closest friends, I keep saying like, at the end of the day, I just want to make art with my friends and get paid to do it. I just want to have summer camp with my friends where we make art
All the
that
time.
maybe that all the time. And I
Yeah.
want someone to pay me to do it. And that's it. That would be
Yeah.
such a happy, joyful, existence for me if
Mhm.
I could do that. Like if, accolades come because of it, cool. But like I don't
Yeah.
need that. What I need is like
Yeah.
the cathartic part of being in the trenches and, getting your summer camp badges, you're like, oh, you're, 8 gallons of blood summer camp badge, that's the best
Yes.
part, that's the
I
stuff. And
love
I think, I think that that's one of the, again, I think the horror community is very much like that. I think that there's like a huge portion of people that are just like, I want to go to summer camp with my friends
that.
as
Mhm.
adults because it's a very different
As adults.
experience. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Not just making beaded necklaces.
I mean, I'm also here for that too. I'm like, I love making
Right.
jewelry. So I'm like, look, are we gonna have a cocktail and make beaded jewelry? Like, I'm in,
Oh, that actually sounds fun.
right?
Like drinking while doing it around a campfire with s'mores.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm like, give me all the cheese, give me some solid cocktails, give me a bunch of crafts
Mhm.
to do, and
Yeah.
a bunch of friends to talk about weird stuff. Chef's kiss. I'm in. That's it.
Perfection. That's
Do you
all I
want to
want.
pay me to do that? Oh, then I'm done. That's my full-time job? Okay.
Well, we should probably talk about the movie.
Great.
If
Cool.
you want. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
So, just really quick for our viewer, The Demon is a horror sci-fi thriller feature, and Sara Fletcher got to play the wife of the, I guess he's the lead, but it's more of an ensemble type of film. And The Demon was written and directed by Matt Davino and David Michael Yohei. It's about a man who goes to the lake where his father supposedly took his own life. And the man starts to go mad when his wife, played by Sara Fletcher, brother in law, and sister in law show up to help him. They all meet the same fate. It was creepy. It was really creepy.
Yeah.
Like the demon, the monster, I loved the imagery of that. Like I don't know if you had any input creatively with that, but like what was your take on that?
I mean, I will say David and Matt, who are our directors, they really loved Lovecraft. This is really like an homage to him and, this
Totally.
sort of like bigger kind of cosmos that we all live in.
Yeah.
And they wrote it during COVID when shit
Oh
was real
wow.
bad. Yeah. And
Yeah.
they were like, okay, how can we cope and deal with sort of the horror of some of the trauma that they had been going through in their personal lives
Mm.
by writing this sort of very cathartic script where like ultimately like everybody quote unquote dies. I'm not really spoiling anything if you know Lovecraft.
Yeah.
But I think that for them, one of the biggest issues from what they've said about watching other quote unquote monster movies or Lovecraftian stuff is that you don't see the monster in its fullness. And
Mm.
they really wanted to make sure that that imagery was really brought to life to kind of expand the universe that they created to sort of show that like Lovecraft was really about we are all one, we are all part of the cosmos, we are not
Mhm.
actually this individual that we always like think of ourselves as being, that we're all part of this like general collective. And I think that for them, they went to Joel Harlow, which was very cool, who's like a very well-known special effects monster movie guy who
Wow.
won he won an
Yeah.
Oscar for Pirates, I think. He won
Oh,
for Pirates of the Caribbean, which is pretty cool. And so they went to
that's
him and they were like,
awesome.
"Can you help us design this monster?" And he was like, "Yes." They really wanted to have this thing that sort of gave you the sense that like we are all nothingness. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and
Um,
that's what I felt.
yeah, yeah, and it's kind of like really kind of weird and cathartic, but also I feel like it ties into the times, and also what you and I have already talked about. Like we're just bags of
Yeah.
meat, that are
Mhm.
all gonna die, and that's it.
Yeah, I loved the image. It was, a drawing, but it
Oh
was like you see you see, like, the ocean line, and the creature looks very small, but below the ocean, it's just this gigantic mess of these, humongous tentacles and things, and you're just like, "Oh god." Like,
I think
"Wow,
I
we
think
are nothing."
right, and I think that that's like such a great sort of metaphor for sort of like what we see as humans, right? We sort of compartmentalize this very small thing,
Mm.
right? We're sort of limited by the bodies that we're in, but in fact, like there is a much deeper thing. The iceberg is bigger. I think that the movie really sort of taps into this idea that like we are all these like sort of superficial like ants living in this world, and we are nothingness in the same sense that we are also everything. And I think
Right.
that sort of theme is what the movie really plays on. And when you first
Yeah,
start watching it, you're like, oh, okay, there's these like classic horror tropey characters, but then as you get into
right.
the film, you sort of start to see like, oh no, there's more depth to that, and there's more depth to these
Mhm.
people.
Yeah. Yeah, I really got the sense of that. So, The Demon is currently in the film festival circuit, is that right?
Yes. So we had a pretty crazy run through the fall. And so we were in London, and then we were at Film Quest, and we were at Horror House, and we were at oh my gosh, I don't know. We did like a whole bunch. And now we're at Day of the Dead in
Nice.
Atlanta, which is really
Fun.
cool. And there's several more coming up
Cool.
that will be through the rest of the year. So we're kind of like halfway through
Nice.
the festival run, which has been really cool and very exciting.
Well, I'm very excited to hear all about the upcoming festivals and everything. That'll be so great. But you, in your email, you also said you're gearing up to shoot a horror short. Have you done that already? And what is your horror short about? Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, well, yes, there's a lot of things. So, like, this really awesome film community that I've become part of, we're working actually on an anthology. We've sort of like pivoted. I have a horror short that I have been working on that I really want to shoot just for funsies with Fina Sanchez, who you know,
Oh,
who's lovely. She and I are both from Ohio. Her mom lives like literally like 5 miles from my parents, which is even weirder.
no way.
Super weird small town
Wow.
craziness. We didn't know each other in Ohio, but we met doing horror stuff. And so there's this short that I really want to shoot with her that kind of plays on it's really more of sketch, I guess, because it's comedy and I feel like comedy and horror are
Ooh,
actually very much the same.
they
And
are.
so I'm excited to shoot that. But what we're really gearing up to do is we're working on a body horror anthology. The wraparound story is about a werewolf and a vampire who have a podcast, and it's about the horrors of being human and how much they hate, like, it's so gross to be a human, right? Like, humanity is disgusting, they
Yeah.
die, like, ew, like,
Gross.
gross, so
Yeah.
gross. Fina and I will be the werewolf and the vampire, and so that's the wraparound for this sort of like body anthology that I'm working on with this group
Oh
of
my
people
God.
that I'm really excited about. Yeah, so there's definitely like this very sort of like nod to podcasts and also like
Yeah.
nod to this idea that like, humans are gross. Like we're
Mhm.
disgusting. Like I shave and I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't know what's going on
Yeah,
downstairs.
I don't know what's happening.
Right.
Oh my God.
Giving birth is like a whole horror process, right? I'm
Yeah,
like, yeah,
yeah,
I'm like, it would be a lot easier if I was a vampire. It's like pretty upfront. It's like blood from neck.
right.
Good. That's it.
Done. Are you the vampire or the werewolf?
I'm the vampire and Fina will be the werewolf. Which is right.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Do you have a title for that yet?
Yes, it's called Strange Frequencies.
Ooh, I
Mhm.
like that.
I can't take credit for that. I have Matt, who is he is going to direct the whole thing. He is the one who
Nice.
came up with that, and I think he's a brilliant filmmaker. So I'm very excited. His name is Matt Cunningham. He's awesome, and he's like a monster maker and has done a million cool things. And that was his
So
sort of like,
cool.
he was like, what if we call it Strange Frequencies? I was like, yes, that's it. Let's do it.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, that sounds so, so, so incredible. I would love to review that. Like that just sounds
Yes.
so fun. Yeah.
We're hopefully gonna shoot. There's two shorts we're gonna shoot that are as part of it. We have a couple of shorts that are part of it. We have to shoot two of the shorts. So hopefully in the next 2 months, and then we'll probably shoot the wraparound stuff in hopefully May, June.
How many segments are in the anthology?
Right now we have like 3.5, 4 pretty locked in. I think it'll end up being 6 to 7. So
Cool.
yeah.
That's a good number.
Yeah, I think so too. I think one of my biggest issues, I don't know about you, how you feel about that horror anthologies, but like sometimes I feel like horror anthologies are just like, yeah, we're just gonna get some random films and just like put them all together, and like there's not a lot of thought about the wraparound story, and that's one thing that Matt and Nate, who are the other two filmmakers I'm working with right now on this project,
Yeah.
we've talked about extensively. Where we've said, no, 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 we want the films to have a reason why they're in it, and we want it to
Right.
feel like it wasn't just thrown together.
Yes. I actually just interviewed Mary O'Neill, if you know her, and she did an anthology called Tenants.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was like,
Yeah.
"Wait a second."
Yeah.
Right, which was great because she
Yes.
really, I felt like, tied the way that it was all tied together was fantastic, and I thought
Yes.
that, like, it was such a smart way. It was super,
Yeah.
super smart how she tied it together. I was like, "Oh, that's so brilliant. Why has nobody thought about that before?" You know?
In our interview, we talk about anthologies like Trick or Treat, which I'm repeating myself, but it is my most and least favorite anthology movie, or Halloween movie even, because it has, my least favorite scene of all time in it, because you'll know immediately, I can't do vomit,
Oh,
and
okay.
and there's a pretty notable scene, and I just, like, every time I think about it, I go, no."
I think everybody's got a line somewhere, and when you find a
Yes.
line, you're like, "Oh, that's my line? Okay, I get it. I
Okay.
can't I
Yeah.
can't I can't do that." And it's like, for you, if it's
Yeah.
some people, it's birds,
Right.
some people, it's clowns, and some people, it's
Yeah.
vomit.
Yes.
That's really fair.
Yeah.
It's I will say, having children, there's vomit in my life.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
definitely, one of my top reasons why I would not like to procreate.
I don't blame you. Don't do
Yeah.
it. Don't do it. It's not for the faint of heart. When your child's, like,
No.
next to you sick, vomiting, like, into, like, your hands, you're like, "I'm not no one prepped me for this horror." No. At no point was my mom like, "Hey,
Yeah.
just so you know, like, at some point, your kid will probably, like, vomit all over you." Like, in my brain, that never clocked for me, and then I was like, "Oh,
No.
okay." It's pretty
Oh,
terrifying.
well, I guess I'll, end this with one last question. What's your favorite horror film at the moment?
Ooh. You know, like, as somebody who doesn't get to watch a lot of horror because I have kids, so, like, by the time nighttime hits and they're in bed and I, like, am laying there, I'm like, "Oh, I should either go to sleep or I should stay up until 2 a.m. because I can't because I can't sleep." Um, honest to God, I think some of my favorite horror content is, like, short films that I've seen on the festival circuit.
Nice.
Um, and there is one, and I cannot remember the name of it, and I should remember the name of it, but there was a horror
Yeah.
film I saw. It was about AI. It was a short film, and it was about a guy who was like, if I can figure out this AI thing and this being that keeps popping up in AI, maybe I can continue to be an artist. And so what happens through the course of the short is that, like, this figure keeps popping up, and then it sort of becomes like the AI takes over his world and, like, vice versa, and he eventually pulls, like, worms out of his eyeball. It's such a terrifying film.
Oh my god.
It's like 10 minutes, and it left such a lasting impression with me that I still, to
Clearly.
this day, think about it all the time. The name of the film is the name of the woman, and I cannot remember the name.
Oh,
But the filmmaker was super cool too. I got to meet him, and I was like, this is so scary. Like, how did you come up with this?" And I think it's got such really cool legs that it could continue, and sort of what this figure looks this it's like a woman figure. Um
mhm.
and sort of this idea that, like, we sort of get scared that AI is going to take over. And so for me, like, that I think is probably one of the coolest horror pieces I've seen in a really long time.
Oh, that sounds horrifying.
It's really
Do you
horrifying.
know, did it play at FilmQuest?
It played at Horror House, and
Okay.
did it play? It might have played at Film Quest too.
Where is Horror House again?
That's based out of Santa Clarita.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I've spoken to several filmmakers who've mentioned that they went there, and I'm like, "God, I wanna be involved in that. That sounds really fun."
Oh my gosh, you have to come. So I host Horror House,
Oh, do
which is
you?
I do, which is super fun, and it's also been, like, such a great way to see films. Like, I before the last two seasons I've hosted, and so, like, I every filmmaker who shows up, I watch their film, and so I think I watched like 90 shorts. And then to meet the filmmakers and, like, why they chose to make those films and, like, how cathartic it
Mhm.
was for them, I feel like
Yeah,
that's all part of it. Mora,
yeah.
Mora is the name. Mora. I just found it.
Mara.
Mora.
Okay.
Fantastic. There's also another really great horror film that was a short called Jade that is about a motorcycle. It's like a sexy motorcycle horror film, and I know that sounds like a really weird sale, but is so good and so weird and so beautifully done that, like,
Wow, okay.
it's a total piece of art. So, but Mora is terrifying. If you can see Mora, the short film, it's really, really good. Mora.
Thank you for
Yes,
that recommendation.
of course. Absolutely.
Um, Well, it's just been amazing talking to you. I hope we
You
continue to,
too.
like, talk and, like, yeah,
Yes.
and see each other in person and all
Yes.
of that, because you are just an absolute joy to speak to. So thank you
Oh,
so
well,
much
thank you
for this.
so much for having me on. Really, more importantly, like,
Yeah.
thanks for this hangout session. Like,
Yeah. Thanks for hanging out with me for, like, an hour.
I know. Thank you. I'm all
Yeah.
about it. I'm like, yes, please. Like, let's hang out and talk about weird film stuff.
It's been such a pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
I
Alright.
guess, do I just wave and say goodbye? This is how this works.
Yeah.
And then either that or
Okay.
like like a giant knife will come stab me in the head.
Yeah,
That's how this
exactly.
ends, right?
Yeah. Oh my god. Now I have to find a graphic. Aw.
There you go. Amazing. Oh my gosh.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, that's it from me and Sarah. Hope you enjoyed this week's Filmmaker Friday. Tune in every Friday for a new filmmaker interview episode. Please don't forget to like, comment, follow, and subscribe. You can follow Sarah at the social media handles below. Bye, babe.